Welcome to the After Dark podcast with Anthony James and Konrad. Episode 8. As you sow, so shall you reap. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
Hello, and welcome to the After Dark podcast. I'm Anthony James, and that's Konrad.
Hello.
That's him. This week on the After Dark podcast, we're looking at episode 8. I'm not going to try and pronounce it yet. I'll pronounce it later on. And this episode was very interesting, Konrad. What did you think?
Yeah, there's a lot that happens in this episode. A lot of developments, a lot of theories coming out of this. Perhaps some that need to be revisited from before.
Okay, so Konrad was just telling me just before we started recording, at the end of this episode, he had a good idea, and what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of the theories that he has got wrong so far. So in Konrad's theory matrix, he's crossed a load off that haven't come true. So we're going to be going through them.
This was a bad episode for that. I'll lead with that and say if you're looking forward to hearing me sounding like an idiot because I got loads of things wrong, stay tuned. Stay tuned.
This is the week for you. Okay, awesome. If you want to subscribe to us on YouTube, if you haven't already, that'd be fantastic. If you want to subscribe on the podcasting apps, so Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the general big ones, they seem to be all there. If they're not on a podcasting app, it's because that podcasting app wants to own us, and that's not going to happen. So subscribe there. I see we actually had quite a big boost in subscribers this week, so thank you very much. Keep going. That'll be fantastic. What else do we have to say? Oh, yes, I was going to say Konrad and I were speaking, and I've got a bit of an announcement/not announcement. In the next few weeks, it's going to be a bit different. Next week's episode, for episode 9, we aren't going to be able to have any questions from you. Actually, that sounds pretty harsh, but we're not going to be able to get your questions. So there'll be no question and answers video. And the reason for that is that I'm expecting my second child, and that could be happening any moment. And I'm pretty sure it will happen any moment. So we have to actually record a couple of these episodes in advance. So therefore, we're not going to get your questions in time. So we do apologize about that. If you do leave questions on the video, maybe I'll still put the link there for the questions on that episode, on episode 8 for 9 and 9 for 10. And maybe we'll get around to them in maybe the season roundup if they're still relevant. Or maybe we'll touch on them one day. Maybe I'll just ask Konrad and we'll have a chat about it ourselves. But that's the case. So the thing will still be there, but don't expect those episodes. Okay, does that sound fair, Konrad?
Yeah, I think big news is congratulations on the baby and everything. I'm sure all of your subscribers are congratulatory and cheering on the idea of a new Dark viewer joining the world.
Oh, don't worry. I'm thinking, what age could I introduce them to Dark?
Oh, straight away. Get them in.
Yeah.
Totally appropriate for children.
Maybe I'll just let them watch it, and then they'll grow up with speaking German, and then they can
exactly.
They can tell me how to pronounce everything.
Yeah, you want them to be a polyglot.
All right. Okay. Awesome. So we're going to go into the episode now. With that being said, do not comment. Although do comment. I'll still like to read them, but do not comment.
Still comment, but just know that we won't be able to address it specifically in the next video.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go.
Oh, let's break it down.
So the episode opens. Hell is empty and all of the devils are here. William Shakespeare.
Yep. It's did you ever watch Garth Marenghi's Dark Place?
I did watch an episode or two of that, yes. I haven't seen the whole thing.
He would sometimes put like Shakespeare quotes in between scenes in his episodes, and this reminded me of that, just because it's very sort of dramatic and there's a lot of gravitas to it, which made me laugh as soon as I saw it. But it's very appropriate. It's from The Tempest, which is about a group of people kind of stranded on an island, which kind of mirrors what we're seeing here.
Yeah. Although what we're seeing here is not lost, but, thematically. Right.
Yeah. A time island.
So I'm sure then, Konrad, you were very interested to see how this episode opened with a young boy who obviously you sort of have gauged that is Helga because he woke up from the sort of dream or nightmare he was having, and this was the young boy. Yeah. So he's riding through what you will come to learn is 1953.
Yeah.
And he rides up to the nuclear power plant, or I suppose he follows a young Egon Tiedemann up to the nuclear power plant where there's two young boys' bodies been found. And the power plant hasn't been built yet. I'm going to let you have a little go at this first, and then, as always, I'll maybe add something, maybe not.
So probably the first thing that I noted about young Helga in this scene, and indeed this entire episode, is that he's a bit weird as a character. He just does weird things sometimes.
Well, he's got the Charlotte collecting dead birds thing.
Absolutely, he does. Yeah, he's, you know, I understand why he gets bullied. Let's just put it that way. That's a joke. That's not an endorsement of bullying. Please don't go bully people. Obviously the big thing in this opening is them finding the bodies in 1953, which prompts the question, why are these bodies being disposed of in 1953, and why here? Obviously, we know what's going to happen. Well, by the end of this episode, we have an idea of what's going to happen at the nuclear power plant. And it seems very purposeful that these bodies were left here as opposed to actually disposed of in a way. I mean, there's woods all around Vinden, so it's not unreasonable that you could actually hide a body in a place where it wouldn't be found. So these clearly were intended to be found. And also something which comes back a bit later, but which is first shown here, is Egon with a rosary on his rear view mirror, which by the end of this episode, I feel like they've done a really good job of kind of fleshing out Egon's character. But this idea that he in his younger days might have been a spiritual or religious man, gives a kind of another stripe to how he is in the 80s, and kind of laces this entire timeline with a sort of touch of sadness for what we know happens to him.
Yeah, exactly. And a few things I was going to add to this scene. A few things that I've noticed sort of through the watch-alongs that I've done, and like rewatches. Sorry, a couple of interesting things to note. First thing to note is it's really cool. I think the fact that Ulrich was convinced in 2019 that the nuclear power plant had something to do with the boys going missing, or that they were in the grounds of the nuclear power plant. And then it just so happens that is true. It's just 66 years in the past.
Yeah, just not when he thought it happened.
Yeah, exactly. So, but he had a good intuition though. Another thing is, which is another sort of really cool little bit of irony, is the fact when Helga comes, and he's little Helga, and he's on his bike, and then Egon looks at him. They're sort of discussing, Egon is discussing with the other policeman. Did you clock who the other policeman was, by the way? I don't want to give it away just in case. Or not really a spoiler, really, but
I don't think I did. No, the one who's kind of who he has a discussion with later about arresting people before they've actually done anything.
Yeah, so it's not a spoiler. That's actually Enos, that's Enos's father. So that's Daniel Konrad. So
okay, I didn't catch the name.
Technically, that's like Mikkel/Michael's adoptive grandfather.
Okay, yeah, I didn't catch that character's name actually, so that's interesting.
So basically what I noticed was Helga, after Egon and Daniel Konrad were talking about who could have done this or whatever, Egon turns around and he sees young Helga. Yeah. We know that Helga, middle-aged Helga, is the one who done this. So yeah. So he's right there, and then sort of young Helga discovers his older selves, sort of nefarious actions, which is it's a nice little bit of irony. So there's a couple of cool bits of irony in that opening scene.
Yeah, no, definitely. And Helga, young Helga, is kind of, I feel like, presented as throughout this episode as having a kind of certainly a morbid infatuation with death, if not an unhealthy attachment to it. And it's really kind of subtle and smart in the way that the child actor's performance kind of hints at that throughout this episode, although, as you say, with the birds later, it is explicitly stated once or twice.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm watching the dub, so there's nothing subtle about it, but
I like dead birds.
Yeah.
Going to be a line in that scene.
Yeah. Also, they have the sign of the nuclear power plant coming, which really reminded me of the sign in Hill Valley in Back to the Future about the new in 1955 it is with the new housing development coming. That reminded me of that.
Very kitschy.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're going to be moving on to the pronunciation section. So the name of this episode in English is As You Sow, So You Shall Reap. So shall you reap, sorry. As you sow, so shall you reap. It's going to be a lengthy one for the YouTube title. Anyway, okay. I don't know. There's a few things in here that are going to catch me up. I can tell you that now. Right, here we go.
Take a running start at it.
Was man satt, das wird man ernten.
I think you're pretty close. Yeah, was man satt, I think, is how you'd say that because of the umlaut, and then das wird man ernten. Or yeah, I think it's wird.
Wird.
I think it's wird, or it might be wird. Like, I can't actually remember, but I think I'm pretty. I think you were quite close to it. I'm not confident I've changed it in any constructive way, to be honest.
See, I took such a running start on it that you have no idea even if there's any mistakes in it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded convincing to my, again, highly trained ear. You know, if you wanted to say to me, "Ich bin ein Berliner," and that is a joke about JFK for those paying attention at home, I would, which I appreciate, is
Ich bin
about,
ein Berliner.
I only know that joke because of The Simpsons, to be honest, but it is about 60 years too late. But yeah, if you wanted to claim that that du bist ein Berliner, I would believe you.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm interested to know because a couple of the times, like there was an interesting discussion in the comments in the last episode about the meaning of Kreuzwege, which was the name of the word from meant crossroads. But there was a really interesting comment. I don't know if you saw it, Konrad. It was going through the idea that the word actually means sort of it's referred to in Germany as like the stations of the cross, like Jesus.
Yeah, I did see that actually, and it's fascinating. For there's quite a brief moment later in this episode, which we'll probably come back to, but where Egon is literally at a crossroads. Well, yeah, 50s Egon is at a crossroads, and I immediately thought back to that comment on the video because that's not the kind of subtext that someone who doesn't know the sort of context of the language would spot. So that's a really awesome comment.
Yeah. There's been a few things like that which you would really need to be a German speaker or from Germany to pick them up. And there's also there's one of the questions in the question and answers this week is about something that seems to be about German culture or a book within Germany at the minute. It's popular, but I would have no idea about it, but we'll talk about it when we get there anyway. But it's laced with the stuff that we as non-Germans wouldn't really get, but it's cool to have it pointed out. Okay, awesome. So we then go into one of many scenes. Now I'm going to try and amalgamate them as much as possible. It's not going to be possible the whole time, but I'm going to try to. Of H.G. Tannhaus and the Stranger talking about time and talking about the universe, I suppose. Yeah. And this is interlaced with basically Ulrich's journey throughout the episode.
I mean, they've kind of mirrored in a way what the episode with Jonas going through the caves, where the sort of H.G. Tannhaus's workshop stuff with the Stranger is really smartly used to kind of dole out information about that recontextualizes what we're seeing in the 50s with Ulrich's journey. So it's this really cool back and forth between those two sort of stories, if you like.
Yeah, and we don't have to get into the technicalities of what they're speaking about, but they're sort of trying to do the sciencey schmiancy explanations.
Yeah.
You know, like Einstein, Rosen bridge, lunar solar cycle. Like I've got a maths degree, so a lot of it, you know, rings in the right ballpark. Do you know what I mean? And that in a show like this, in a film or a TV show, all you need to do is just to make it convincing and make it in the right ballpark. You know, I'm sure there's not any scientific papers written about tunnels going into a cave about going through time that way. But as long as you make it in the right ballpark and somewhat explain what you're talking about, the audience will go along with you. Now, I'm sure someone's going to comment in the comments saying it actually does make perfect sense because, but I'm just saying it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to.
We've got some experts on relativity ready, poised and ready to point us in the right direction.
Yeah, and I would love to read those comments, but I just want to make it known that it doesn't need to make full sense, even if you believe, and even if it does. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it just needs to feel real for the world that it's happening in. I think I'm a total layperson when it comes to this, and it certainly sounded believable to me.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Awesome. So we'll probably come back and revisit like this little bits as we go along because there's some interesting parts in there. Little dialogue, the whole episode makes this podcast a little hard to do this episode because it is literally interlaced through the whole thing. But we'll try. So then we get a scene where we're introduced to Helga's mother, who is called Greta Doppler, and there's actually a great transition from Ulrich in the tunnel with his little his little lighter.
Yeah, his hand must be absolutely burning, having his lighter guiding his way.
Yeah, and all of the like petrol or whatever's in there just sparking out. Did you notice that?
Yeah, and I also as well, his entire the whole like Ulrich journey through the caves is very unpleasant because like the lighter looks uncomfortable and there's like really great effects with the fuel sparking off it, and his wounds just look so disgusting as well. Like they've done a really good job with the makeup on Ulrich this episode. He looks like a man who hasn't slept in 5 days and has gotten into a fight with security at a nuclear plant.
Yeah, so they've actually done exactly what they've made him look exactly like what he's done.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a great transition from him in the cave. It's really eerie and like sort of really tense, and then it just cuts to like this really whimsical like 50s score or like 50s song of Helga going into his house.
Yeah,
riding his bike in. It was such a juxtaposition. I just absolutely loved it.
Yeah, there's a definite tonal shift when they sort of cut to a lot of these 50s scenes, which is interesting as well because the music is tonally fairly inconsistent with what we actually see happen inside the Doppler house.
Yeah, actually, this is a good point to say, Konrad, or to get your thoughts. We've sort of just jumped right into this, accepting that we're in the 50s. I want to actually just get your thoughts. What did you think when you started watching this episode and you realized, oh, this is in the 50s and we're getting a whole, like they're in episode 8 of the first season, they're giving us all these new characters in a new setting.
So I sent you this in a message, but for the listeners' benefit, the absolute balls on the writers of this show, they're like the audacity to be like, I know, we're on episode 8 of a 10-episode season. How about we introduce an entirely new cast of characters?
Yeah.
Outrageous thing to do. But I mean, fair play to them. They succeed. But there isn't a sane writer in the world who 80% of the way through a screenplay or a book says, I know what we need. Let's throw an entirely new arc in here.
Yeah, you just imagine any film that you've ever seen in your life, and like literally like an hour and a half in, it just shifts, and you just get a brand new show.
Yeah, you get laughed out of the building trying to get that film made, but apparently Baron Borodor and Jan Fries, I guess because they were making their own thing, they were their own masters. They got to do it. Yeah,
like the big risk takers. I think as well, like if you look at the first half of the season and the second half of the season, there's definitely some mirroring going on. They have the same ebbs and flows. Like the first half of the season went from 2019, and then slowly we got into 1986. We had the whole episode of episode 3 in 1986, and this is kind of like the episode 3 of the second half of the season.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, where it's just kind of, it's really dedicated to establishing what's going on in the 50s.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So we then get the scene between Helga's mother, Greta, and him. She's ordering him to undress. She seems to be a very strict woman.
Doesn't seem like, it's, as soon as I saw how she was with him, I started suspecting that she was like an evil stepmother because she doesn't seem very loving of him at all. But maybe she's just an emotionally horrible woman.
Yeah, she seems that way. I think later on when she's calling his name in the garden, she sort of seems to have let her guard down a bit. But but definitely she's very cold, very cold.
She enjoys humiliating him by the looks of things, which is, it's interesting the way this episode makes like kind of ebbs and flows and how it makes you feel about Helga.
Yeah, and I think as well, like it definitely, we're talking about the tonal shift into the 50s. I think that definitely it's the idea of being a strict household and, being very conservative. And I think that plays a part into the way that they're getting this actress to act this character, because it really is a massive shift from the other mothers we've seen.
Yeah, definitely. Like there's no maternal instinct here whatsoever.
Yeah. And then we get Bernd Doppler. In he comes. He's a little bit more. This Bernd Doppler, I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm watching the dub. But this time watching it, I thought to myself, Bernd's a lot more goofy than I thought he'd be as a younger man.
He's not. I don't know if I'd say he's goofy in the German, but he's definitely a lot more kind of jovial and friendly than his older self seemed.
Yeah, I would say that. So then Helga says, here, there's some dead bodies down there. Go take a look. Obviously, Bernd is sort of the one spearheading the power plant, so off he goes down to check it out.
Back to work,
yeah. Okay, so the next scene we get, as we always need to get when we go to a new time zone, we need to get the coroner's office.
Yeah, finally a coroner who doesn't make jokes around corpses. Although actually, this coroner does unwittingly make a very funny joke, which we'll probably get to in a second.
Yeah. So in the scene, there's 2 dead bodies this time, which makes it a bit different than the other coroner scenes, I suppose. They go through each bit of possession, a bit like they went through the possessions of who we now know as Mads back in episode 2, I believe. They went through the possessions of the body they found in 2019. And they go through with the coin on the string, the burnt eyes, the made in China tops, which is, again, very Back to the Future.
Yeah, and they're completely dumbfounded by this possibility and suggest they might be from China.
Yeah, like even Egon read the label and then he said, "From where?" But yeah, it felt like Back to the Future, you know, like all the best stuff's made in Japan.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then the joke that you were talking about, Konrad, comes around, and it's
This is great. I love it. It's like, especially given the context in which it comes up. Like only Dark could could get humor out of a scene at a coroner's office where they're inspecting the bodies of 2 dead young boys.
yeah, like basically, obviously, the joke is that they're dumbfounded and have no idea what the tattoo of a unicorn spitting rainbows.
But I feel like there's like a production joke in there on the part of the creators too, because they give you a close up on it in a way that feels like it's kind of, they're saying, "Oh, this is important," and it's so obviously not important.
Yeah.
It's just them being like, "Oh,"
yeah,
because that's what these dumb police are choosing to focus on. I will actually point out as well in this scene, on a slightly more serious note, that this put the kibosh on my pennies being from a certain time. So obviously all the pennies are from 1986, regardless of what, or thus far are all from 1986, regardless of what time the kids came from. I have another theory about this, but we'll get more into that later.
Yeah, but I will just say, I don't know if I'm basically giving away what your theory is. I don't know what it is, but I will just say you kind of you're still a little bit right, because we've sort of got we've got pretty big hints at the minute that the bunker is the place where the wallpaper is and all in 1986.
Yeah.
So the idea, we've seen Eric in that room. So you can imagine maybe Yasin was in that room too. So
I think he was, yeah.
So that they were both in 86 at some point. So that's where they came from, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? The last place they were, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, so
maybe your idea still sort of counts a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, yeah, not to get too much into it now, but basically the sort of the triquetra that's mentioned in the first H.G. Tannhaus scene, where they're talking about there being 3 paths, you know, past, present, and future, played into this, and maybe it's something to do with where the center of the particular wormhole is. But we'll get more into that shortly after.
Okay, cool.
Actually, yeah, in a couple of scenes' time, I think.
Awesome. And then in the next scene, we get Ulrich emerging from the cave. He's in 1953.
Yeah, and I love the way they distinguish with fairly, I mean, it's not that subtle, but fairly subtle imagery, the entrances to the cave in 53, 86, and 2019 with the grate, and then the 86 doesn't have anything, and then 2019 has the drug chair.
Yeah, and 2019 also has the strip of police tape as well, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so really subtle ways to do it, but yeah. So you have to sort of, you'll know going forward, you have to keep an eye out for which time zone we're in when it shows people going in and out of the cave. And that they're the visual clues for you. Okay, so we then get, I hesitate to say montage, but it's sort of a long period of the episode where there's not really any dialogue. And Helga is play acting as a soldier. Goes down into the bunker. He's shooting things with a stick that looks very, very like a rifle. It also has a really interesting, like, sort of decision directorially, or, you know, maybe the cinematographer made it, was to have like a POV shot, like it's a video game, but the gun, which is the stick, is there to stick. Did you notice that shot?
Oh no, I didn't notice that at all, actually. When was that? Was that when he was going into the bunker?
Just before he went into the bunker, he was like, it showed a POV shot of Helga, and he was moving the stick around, and he eventually pointed at the bunker, and then he went into the bunker.
Oh yeah, no, I did notice that actually, but I didn't. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't register that that's kind of something they don't tend to do very often.
Yeah, it sort of looked like a video game in a way, but instead of having a gun, you had a stick.
Yeah.
And then you see on the wall when he's down there, all the dates are on the wall. So we were already confirmed, but that confirms that yes, it was indeed that room at that time zone where Noah was cleaning the floor.
Yeah.
We also get Helga getting bullied. We mentioned that earlier on.
Yeah.
And
Giving him what for?
Given him what for, but what for is actually urination upon himself. It was disgusting.
It's so gross. And to be honest, actually, as well, these boys raise a point that I was going to mention earlier, and I forgot to. So he's been given some money to give to Claudia, but when these boys take it off of him, but when his mum tells him about them, she says the coins for Claudia are on the table, which just seemed like a really, really well. First off, Claudia's got a mention, which I was really excited about.
Yeah.
But also, it just feels like a really weird way of phrasing that. I'm sure it's nothing. I'm sure it's just them putting a little nod to the idea of coins in the script without it actually meaning anything. But yeah, it was just an odd way to phrase that felt very purposeful. But yeah, these boys steal them anyway.
Yeah, maybe actually I see what you mean there, because every word counts, and the idea of saying coins in the dub. Now, maybe if it does mean something, obviously we know the dub isn't gonna be making it mean something. So I think in the dub they just said money. But I think in the show, in the German version of the show, I would expect them to say money as well. But so coins just feels like an interesting choice of words. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so then Ulrich comes to Helga's aid.
Yeah.
He doesn't know it's Helga at the minute though, and he says to him, next time bite them. So he's trying to give him advice how to stop the bullies, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's he may come to regret that biting advice.
Yeah. He should have actually just let them continue, and he could drown or something. Right. Then we get a shot of. It's actually a really short shot, and it's led into, I think, I don't even know if it's led into with dialogue, but it's just a shot of Noah standing in front of the church, holding his little book. But is there any reason for this shot, you think?
Well, I mean, there might be some symbolism behind the stranger talking about 33 years old is when the Antichrist begins his reign, and then cutting to a shot of Noah. I couldn't possibly tell you what the symbolism is behind that, but it feels like maybe there's a reason.
So I've actually amalgamated all the Stranger and HG's townhouse scenes in my notes here.
Yeah.
So that's why I was thinking what led into it, because I couldn't quite remember. Yeah, that makes sense then. So it cuts to the priest. And
no reason whatsoever for that cut. Noah's just a perfectly nice guy. There's nothing to worry about there. And I noticed he had the Chiketra on his quote unquote Bible, and I'm pretty sure that's not a Bible. But I love that cut, because it's just, you get the stinger for Noah, and it's this. I think this is possibly the first time that it's ever really, really explicitly hinted that the stranger and Noah know each other. I don't know if we've really had any confirmation of that. Obviously we suspect it, but I think this is the first time that it's really kind of almost been explicitly stated.
Yeah, it stated through the direction of the show. Yeah. Okay, so then we get Egon at the police station talking to Daniel Konrad. I think they're just talking about the case. It's sort of another. It's an episode. It is an episode with many mirrors to the previous timelines we've seen. So we're again getting sort of Egon and Daniel Konrad talking through the case in a similar way to Ulrich and Charlotte would have done. Just mirroring that. Obviously, we as an audience know what's happening, so it's not like we're not along the ride. We're not on the ride with these characters in terms of finding out the mysteries of the dead bodies. We know the answers, but it's still interesting to see that. I don't know if you even have any notes on that scene.
I think so. Obviously, the cut from Noah kind of smiling around at where he knows the graves will be to an image of Yasin and Eric's bodies is smart, because it just reinforces the idea that he's obviously had something to do with it. But I think the thing that I really took away from Egon in general in this episode is there's a touch of like the Tommy Lee Jones and No Country for Old Men about his character in this, where he's sort of this idealistic, maybe even like spiritual cop who doesn't really understand the world that he's trying to protect anymore. And it's a really interesting bit of characterization, because he feels that way now, and it's only going to get worse, which perhaps explains, or partially explains, because I have some ideas about what else may cause it, but partially explains why, you know, he turns to drink and becomes really jaded in his later life. And obviously there's the other cop talking about being able to punish kids for what they'll do in later life is very Minority Report. Well, it predates Minority Report, but it made me think of Minority Report, and perhaps that idea will come back in a fairly big way later in the episode.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, one thing I actually wanted to do from this episode, looking at this maybe seems a good place to do it because there's not much going on in this scene. I wanted to look at a couple of these characters and think about or theorize what they would have been doing a decade before this, whenever the war was going, the war was raging on. So
Yeah.
Egon, what do you think Egon was doing during the war? Do you think he was a German soldier?
Yeah, I think I don't know how old. I guess he's probably early 30s here, so he would have probably been in the Wehrmacht, I think, and during the war. I actually don't know whether. I assume there must have been like pretty widespread conscription during the war. So
Oh yeah, I imagine so.
So I guess pretty much all of the kind of characters between the ages of sort of late 20s to early 40s would have been in the military in some capacity.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's interesting that it doesn't mention it, but I guess it's, you know, it's not necessarily like they're not necessarily dealing with people with PTSD from the war or anything, although they don't necessarily want to get into those kind of themes.
Yeah, they're very explicitly avoiding the war. There are some allusions to it throughout the series, but very much so they are trying to avoid that. Although I will say I'm pretty sure that Bernd Doppler has a war injury. I imagine that's what he has.
I was wondering why, like where his injury came from and whether we would find out, but it stands to reason that it could potentially have come during the war. And yeah, without giving too much away, there's a fairly big hint to, if not the war, then potentially a war later in this episode.
There is. Okay, so moving on swiftly from that, we get the voice of H.G. Tannhaus is sort of monologuing over this sort of intro to this scene, and it's talking about meeting your father if you go back in the past. So actually, so Ulrich actually runs into, as we've discussed, time travel films and TV shows always do this. You have one of the first people you see has to be a relative of yours.
Yeah, the rule.
So he finds good old Tronte himself and Agnes, who is his grandmother.
And she's wearing red, which means she is a loose woman in the the rules of cinema. If you are wearing a red dress, you are what's the words? Oh my god, it's completely gone from my head. But like adulterous.
Yeah.
You're philandering.
Yeah, you're up for a good time, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's very glamorous compared to the rest of this 50s world we're given, and sort of maybe we'll have a little discussion about something in the future in this episode. In this episode, it sort of catches someone's eye, it seems. Do you know what I'm alluding to?
I'm trying to think now. I don't know.
Okay, well maybe we'll just forget I said that. Go and watch the episopd again.
Wait, what catches someone's eye? I'm trying to think what.
Agnes, and her the fact that she's sort of very glamorous, put across very glamorous. She's very clearly takes much better care of herself than some other characters. There's someone in this episode who, in my viewing of the episode anyway, seemed to be taken by that.
Okay. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were implying it was Ulrich or not. Yeah, we'll come back to that later. That's fine. That's one of my big theories is about Agnes.
If it was Ulrich, that would be absolutely mind-blowing. Because
whatever floats your boat.
It's knowingly his granny. Yeah.
He doesn't even care. Devil may care attitude.
Yeah.
No,
exactly.
it's I thought that the interesting thing about this scene, which does come into that theory a little bit later, is the fact that we know that Agnes is going to stay with the Tiedemans, and they live in the house that Ulrich and Katharina now live in.
Yeah.
Which begs the question: how did the Tiedemans lose that house, and how did the Karnvalds, the Nilsons, get it?
Well, they are going to stay there now.
Well, yeah, but they're going to rent like a room there, and they now in the present they own the house.
So how did that transition happen?
Yeah, I suppose they could have just moved out, but I suspect there may be more to it than that.
Yeah. Of course, there could be. It's just interesting that the house that Toronto goes to in this episode is actually the house that becomes his own.
Yeah.
How that happens,
Exactly.
we'll see. But okay, so more HG Townhouse.
Yeah, there's a great there was just
Yeah.
a really great explanation of black holes here, which reminded me of Sam Neill doing pretty much the exact same thing in Event Horizon, where he sort of bends the paper around, which I'm always a big fan of.
Yeah, anytime you have a visual demonstration in a TV show or a film, it's fantastic. It reminds me of the film Arrival.
Yes.
So I was watching a YouTube video the other day, which I recommend. It's basically it's the writer of the Arrival talking about how he wrote it, and he was trying to speak like, how am I going to get the idea of these symbols of the aliens language? How am I going to get the idea that we have to learn simple words first across? I can't just have a character, explaining this stuff to the audience for 20 minutes. So what he decided to do was have Amy Adams arguing with the rest of the characters, and through arguing or a discussion with two characters with supposed opposing views, that actually is a way for us as an audience to not even realize we're being taught.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's not that these characters are debating each other or not, but there is a little bit of disagreement at the end of their discussion, which sort of leads to that. So we're getting a lot of exposition, but it's put across in a way that isn't boring, because it's two characters sort of fleshing out their own beliefs, and
definitely it's this awesome like expository dialogue, but it's delivered through a totally believable conversation. And I think a part of what lends it such legitimacy as well, which I didn't actually mention because it's a really stupid pun, but the moment that the first thing H.G. Tannhaus says to the stranger is where he says "on time like clockwork," which is a really dumb pun for a clockmaker to make, but it also implies the stranger has been there multiple times before, and we're hearing the kind of middle snippet of a long running conversation, or perhaps the end of a conversation based on what happens between these two characters. But that's that sense that we're being kind of dropped into the middle of something, lends the exposition that they give us a sense of kind of legitimacy in a way that it potentially wouldn't have if it was just two characters meeting each other for the first time and having this conversation apropos of nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And as well as like alluding to the idea they might have met each other multiple times, a cooler way to think about it is maybe H.G. Tannhaus knew somehow that he was coming at that time, even though they never met before.
Possibly. Yeah.
I also like the idea of everything from this conversation, all the different times we've heard H.G. Tannhaus like talking about the science and all this black holes and stuff the whole way through the series. It's actually been lifted from this conversation the whole time.
Yeah.
I like that as a theme running through.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some merit to that as an idea, that there's this kind of conversation about his theories that kind of underpins the exposition of the entire series. I'll be interested to see if that kind of carries on.
After that scene with the stranger and H.G. Tannhaus, we then go back in time that was happening in 86. We go back in time to 1953 again, and Ulrich goes and visits H.G. Tannhaus because he goes and finds him on the back of the book that he got from Helga about a journey through time. And he goes to H.G. Tannhaus and asks, is this you? And it's the picture on the back.
He's an idiot. Ulrich is an idiot in this scene. It's like clearly not him. Well, I mean, it is him. It's older him, but like, it'd be like bringing me a picture of myself 30 years in the future and be like, "Is this you?" It's like I've got no idea. How am I supposed to answer that question?
Yeah, not yet. Yeah. So then there's an interesting part as well. Whenever young Enos and young Yana come in to the shop, and Ulrich goes up and grabs Enos, and is basically going on. Is he demanding to know where? Oh, about the boys. She mentions about the boys found at the power plant, and he's grabbing her saying, "Where? What boys? What boys?" Yeah.
Well, there's a really funny bit in this. Again, the levity is there in Dark if you look for it, where she says she's telling H.G. Tannhaus about the boys, and she says they're abducted by aliens, and
Yeah.
Ulrich like rushes up to her and grabs her by the shoulders and says, "What did you just say?" And then Enos, being an idiot, assumes that he's asking about the aliens rather than the dead boys,
Yeah.
which is so funny. It's just, like, an Ulrich's face Ulrich is a great like foil for comedy because he's so serious and so ridiculous in like a lot of the stuff that he does in this episode. Obviously, not all of it's fun, but I like that they can kind of poke fun at his character by having other characters kind of doing funny things while they're around him.
Yeah, I think like later on as well when he's in the police station, they're like, he's drunk.
Yeah, he's the subject of ridicule throughout much of this episode, and it's well deserved.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Then we get the big reveal in the next scene. Helga shows up to the Tiedemanns' house, and there she is, young Claudia. So he's there to he's there to get some tutoring from her. I thought that was really funny as well. The woman who eventually becomes the head of the power plant is tutoring the head of the power plant's son.
Yeah, and, well, not very well by the looks of things. Poor old Helga.
She doesn't suffer fools, that's for sure.
No, falsch. Just like she's not doing his self-confidence any good whatsoever.
Yeah, there's no like, as a teacher I can say, if you're just going wrong, no one's going to learn a thing. You need to say, why did you get that wrong?
Be constructive, Claudia. This might be a complete misread of this, but I felt like there was a touch of the Wizard of Oz about Claudia here, with the way I'm sure
the dog.
Well, just with like the
Toto?
plaits and the ribbons in her hair and the dog. I'm sure this is a very, very typical thing for a young girl in 50s kind of ruralish Germany to dress like. But when I saw her, I was like, she kind of has a bit of the Dorothy about her hair, which is interesting given what we find out about her at the end of the episode.
Yes, that is true. Sort of in terms of getting sucked away in a hurricane, so to speak.
Yeah. Like I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but I don't know how popular Wizard of Oz is in Germany, generally speaking, to be honest. But that was definitely my first thought when I saw her.
Okay, yeah, I see exactly what you mean. That's a really good thing to notice. Okay, so next scene, or maybe there's a bit of HG and Stranger in between. I'm not sure. I've sort of cut them all together, so let me know if there is. But we get we get Agnes and Tronte arriving to the Tiedemanns' house and having a little bit of a discussion, and then Claudia is there as well. And sort of Claudia's going to take Tronte for a look around as well.
A little potential frisson between Tronte and Claudia, which is interesting, given we know they will be lovers in the future. And Agnes, just to fully confirm the kind of film noir femme fatale that she is clearly dressed to appear like, when asked about her husband, says he's dead and looks away while she says it, which is not a great indication that she's telling the truth.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So I thought it was interesting as well, like the idea in this episode, very much Claudia seems to be the aggressor in the Tronte and Claudia relationship.
Yeah, she strikes me as quite a aggressive, maybe is not the word I'd use, but quite a forthright woman.
Yes, of course. No, but yes, I mean, like, she's the one making the moves.
Yeah, she's pursuing. She's the hunter, so to speak.
Yeah, which is interesting because in '86, Tronte is very much that. I believe he's sort of the whimpering, going to her doorstep, rubbing her hand. He's sort of the other side of that.
Yeah.
So the sort of it shifts a little bit by the time they're older. Maybe Claudius has him under control by that point. Yeah,
like possibly. I mean, I think, Claudia seems like from what we've seen of her, which admittedly isn't much in the 80s, and what we see of her both in 1953 and not 1953 in this episode. She seems like a fairly consistent character who kind of has all her ducks in a row and knows what she wants to do and how she wants to do it, which I think is one of the reasons why I like her.
No, I love Claudia. Okay, cool. So we'll catch up with Claudia later. Then we get the scene at the power plant where Bernd Doppler is giving a speech about the opening of the power plant at the same time. Again, there's a lot of comedy in this episode.
There's a lot of subtext that Bernd doesn't appreciate he's lacing into this speech, which is quite funny.
So like as he's talking about it's the future and all this sort of thing. There's actually two boys from the future dead in a pile over on the side.
And just like little things, like literally you can just go through his speech. So he goes like, man's dominance over nature. And it's like, no, that doesn't happen. And then we'll ensure Vinden's civility. And it's like, well, yes, but not in the way that you think it's going to, because it literally puts it into a never ending wormhole time loop. And then the one bit that I really liked was the one atom can change the world, which feels like a very pointed reference to singularities causing black holes. But this is a very, again, this is quite a funny scene, particularly because he just keeps on looking off at the police, like hammering down a sign as noisily as they possibly can while he's trying to talk about his bright future.
Yeah, and then after he's finished talking about his bright future, Egon comes and talks to him, and he's
this is so funny.
He's very, very convinced that it's the coal miners or the coal plant from down the road.
Yeah, the coal plant operator. So the best thing about this is that I do think that he's right. I think, the bodies were obviously put there to be found. Someone is probably trying to influence either the construction of the nuclear plant or they're trying to influence the nuclear plant in the past in some way. So I think he is correct about that, but it's just really funny that there's like that kind of dramatic pause when Egon asks him who he thinks is responsible for it, and it's like the coal plant's operators. It's like you just could not be further from the truth.
And he says there's a plot. There's a plot. So it made me think of time travel, treason, and plot.
Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah. So okay. So next
also,
scene.
No one respects Egon. Just want to point that out because it's twice now we've seen Egon. He's very idealistic and potentially a little bit naive, but it's kind of sad to see how just no one respects him as a police officer in this episode.
Yeah, and it's even the same in '86. No one respects him, and you sort of thought to yourself, maybe that character sort of he became, near the end of his career, he's sort of not trying that much anymore. It actually seems like he's never really held much respect.
And you can see how you'd become jaded if you've constantly tried to be idealistic and tried to do the right thing, and all you get is just people talking down to you for it.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So Helga, Tronte, and Claudia, and also the dog Gretchen, are at the caves. And Claudia's talking about how sometimes they go and hide in the caves for fun, or they dare each other to go in. Yeah. Helga shows a bit of a mean streak here.
He does.
Well, Claudia makes a comment about thank God we got rid of him. So she's a bit mean as well. But then he throws a stick into the cave and gets rid of Gretchen.
Yeah, this is definitely some pretty sociopathic behavior from Helga, sort of sending the dog into the caves to satisfy his own curiosity, and then just leaving and not saying anything about it is it's not the behavior of a well-adjusted young man.
No, it's not. Okay, so then we get Ulrich, the scene where he comes into the police station, and they say he's drunk, and he's coming in and he's asking about the boys. He wants to know if one of them's Mikkel, and he gets from Egon, he gets the information that, I don't know why he didn't realize this already, that Helga is actually a young boy.
Yeah, right? It's one of those things where the evidence is like right in front of his eyes, but it's not until this moment where he realizes that, yes, this is the 50s, so Helga's going to be young.
Yeah, exactly. So off he goes on his merry way to presumably go and find Helga now. Okay, so then we get Egon arriving home to the Tiedemanns' house, and he gets introduced to Agnes.
Yeah.
He starts actually quizzing Agnes a little bit.
Yeah.
And Doris is like is saying, "Oh, my husband's a police officer. Please excuse him."
And asking interesting questions.
He is asking very interesting questions. And then whenever Agnes is about to sort of expand and maybe give a bit of background information, Claudia and Tronte burst through the door saying, "We've lost Gretchen. We've lost Gretchen." I love the actress who plays Claudia here. I loved her delivery whenever Doris says, "Where's Helga?" and then she goes, maybe Gretchen's with Helga.
Yeah, she's got a very expressive face, young Claudia. I liked her a lot in this.
Yeah, and actually, talking about young Claudia, this is we were talking last week about Alexander Tiedemann being like a successful Homer Simpson,
Yeah.
and the fact that and they had Bart as a child, and you were wondering who's Lisa Simpson. Well,
Yeah, if there is going to be a Lisa Simpson, it's going to be the Claudia or Charlotte for me at the moment. It's probably more likely to be Claudia.
well, a commenter last week sort of pointed out, well, wait till next episode, you'll get your Lisa Simpson. So,
yeah. Does Claudia play the saxophone? That's what I want to know.
oh, but without a doubt, without,
I mean, she's alive in the age of jazz. You know, she's growing up in the age of jazz. So if she doesn't play a saxophone, frankly, they've screwed up in the writing of the character.
Yeah, and she is technically the same family because she's Tiedemann, and so so
perfect.
It all works, you know. It all works.
Who is the well? Following on from that, then, who is the Bleeding Gums Murphy of Dark?
Old Egon.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm willing to accept that. I could definitely see him playing in like sort of a Duke Silver-esque like kind of jazz band.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so we then get the scene that sort of becomes the iconic scene from this episode, and that is Ulrich approaching young Helga on the steps outside the house.
Yeah.
And let me just say, we all know where the scene goes.
Yeah.
Okay. When someone is considering murdering a child, it's probably not the best thing for the child. The worst thing the child could say is that the birds look beautiful when they're dead.
Yeah, like Helga does himself no favors in this scene, frankly. Like he's collecting dead birds is a bit weird. And interesting actually, there's ties him back to Charlotte, who's his daughter-in-law, obviously, so not related by blood, but that feels like an interesting and potentially meaningful connection. But and also the box he's putting them in looks suspiciously like Enos's tree box. So I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into that. But
I think it's a little bit bigger.
But possibly it's just a wooden box, and I'm seeing connections where there are none. But like Ulrich's performance is great in this scene because you can kind of see him working through the idea of what he's about to do in his head, and he's like looking for any justification to do it. And Helga, as you say, isn't doing himself many favors by talking about things being beautiful when they're dead. Certainly gives us a hint of the kind of person that Helga may eventually turn into. But I think what's really great about this scene is in the previous one, obviously like the Tannhaus 83 stuff with the stranger has been talking in the past few scenes before this about the idea of determinism and how the stranger is basically trying to break the sort of loop of determinism, asking if it's possible to kind of to stop things from looping, and that idea that there is this time loop and that the future is influencing the past in this never-ending cycle really gives us a kind of different take on what Ulrich is about to do here. And also, just briefly, it throws up interesting questions about Agnes Nielsen and her origins because she's very deliberately left mysterious.
Yes.
Who could her mother who could her grandmother from Vinden potentially be, and is she actually someone from the future? But yeah, to go back to Ulrich and Helga, this idea that they are caught basically when this started unfolding, I think when I got to this scene, I don't think I fully believed what Ulrich was about to do until things escalated beyond the point where they could be reconciled.
Yeah.
But as soon as that happened, the idea of determinism sort of came into my head, and I started putting all kinds of dots together to do with the penny that he hands Helga before the chase begins, and the book that Ulrich has tucked into the back of his jeans. And it's there's a lot of kind of beautiful connecting of dots in this scene that is fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. And like this really does start the train. This is really the moment in the show where you start actually thinking, oh, yeah, this might be a deterministic model where everything we're seeing actually does predetermine what we've already seen in a way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and like the brilliant dramatic irony of Ulrich doing this, thinking he's, well, obviously he says, mirroring what Helga said in the previous episode, I can change the past and the future, and that's his justification for what he's doing. But in doing what he's doing, he's actually setting things on a course that will cause his son and his brother to be, or his son to go missing and his brother to be murdered.
Yeah, exactly. So coming out of this scene, let's just sort of put our cards on the table. What do we think of Ulrich at this point?
He's a great guy. Great guy. Loved to have a drink with him. Seems wonderful. No,
Leave the dead birds at home.
yeah, like he just he doesn't wrestle with the idea of what he's about to do for that long. You know, I even in a universe where I'd be willing to accept a justification for killing a child for something they haven't even done yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the idea of determinism does raise interesting ethical questions about whether that's ever acceptable to do, but it's kind of like, I guess it's sort of the trolley problem writ large. You know, is it acceptable to take action to do and by your action cause something slightly less horrific to happen if you knowingly would be avoiding something more horrific? And you know, obviously that's a quite common ethical and moral exercise, but he doesn't wrestle with it for very long. He doesn't sort of grapple with the responsibilities of you know, even well, obviously he doesn't like wrestle with the gravity of killing a child. He also doesn't wrestle with the gravity of potentially changing the future. He, like, you know, he doesn't know what these actions or what results these actions are going to have.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also, you know, almost completely remorseless about it. It's just and the way he does it is absolutely brutal. So it's just, yeah, it's horrific. And I think the way they shoot this scene and the sound design of what Ulrich does is deliberately very, very gruesome. It's very horrific. It's very realistic sound, very wet sounding, which is gross.
Yeah.
But yeah, I it's just, Ulrich is awful. Like, easily I'm gonna say my third least favorite character. No, in fact, second least favorite. I like him less than I like Helga, who is actively murdering, or at least helping someone murder children.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I've seen a lot of comments on various forums, and people even commented underneath today's video talking about those forums, and how people are fully on Ulrich's side because it's like, the way they put it is, he went and killed baby Hitler. That's what they say. Would you not kill baby Hitler? Now, let me give my take on that for anyone who wants to comment below. It's not like killing baby Hitler. Hitler's actions led to in excess of 4 million Jewish people and others being exterminated, basically, put in gas chambers. All the difference is, by Ulrich doing this, he's actually being the person who Helga was going to turn into. So by Ulrich actually going and killing young Helga, he's actually just doing the exact act that he's killing Helga for. So it's different than the Hitler example, because you're killing one guy as opposed to 4 million. So it is very, you know, it is debatable, obviously. And there's no real right answer to this. But my idea would be, you're not killing 4 million Jews to kill Hitler. You're not becoming Hitler by killing Hitler. Okay, does that make sense? But but Ulrich is becoming Helga by killing Helga.
Well, I think. Sorry, go on. I think you're totally right there.
Yeah, because Ulrich is being 100% hypocritical by doing this.
Yeah.
Because he is just becoming what he's killing the person who he's killing would become.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this is going to sound like a joke, and it is sort of partially a joke. But if you've ever played like Command and Conquer, like the whole plot of Red Alert is that Albert Einstein discovers how to time travel, goes back in time, and kills Hitler before World War II happens, and something worse happens as a result. And while that is, you know, obviously schlocky and kind of ridiculous, the whole principle that this show is founded on, I think, or one of the big principles that this show is founded on, is that determinism, well, things are deterministic, like acts are deterministic, so you can't actually change the future. I mean, you can change the future with actions you undertake in the past, but they're set on a path because because it's a loop, you can never actually do anything different than what you're already predestined to do.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you could, there's no way to guarantee that the future you're creating by changing time is better than the one that you're avoiding by if you were to leave things as they are. And no one person has the right to make that kind of decision. So I think, and the fact that Ulrich thinks, or maybe I don't even think he does think, which is I don't know if it's better or worse, but certainly he doesn't entertain the responsibility he's taking on by attempting to change time, or the responsibility he's taking on by, or well, responsibility or guilt, I guess is a better word for it, that he's taking on by killing a child. He doesn't seem to take on any of that, and I think that's very consistent with Ulrich as a character throughout this series, where he doesn't really, we haven't really seen him wrestle with any guilt of the actions that he's taken so far. Like, he doesn't feel guilty for his relationship with Hannah, I don't think. I think he feels more guilty that he's been caught, but I don't think he necessarily felt guilty about it. I don't think he's particularly remorseful about killing Helga. And I think that's going to carry on. And he's just, Ulrich has become a thoroughly unlikable character for me. And to go back to, the rape allegations with Katerina, even though they're not mentioned here, and there's still a grey area there. We don't really know what happened. I think it's just further compounding this idea that, there's this litany of evidence against Ulrich for things that he has either definitely done or has the capacity to do, that make him look as bad as pretty much anyone else in the show, with the exception of maybe Noah.
Yeah, exactly. And for all the people who were sort of, without even knowing the ending to that sort of rape allegation storyline, all the people who were supporting and sort of opposed to the idea or arguing in favor of Ulrich in that situation, even though, at that point in the storyline, bearing what happened in episode 8 in mind, it's so obvious that the creators of this show wanted us to view, or in a way anyway, question whether or not Ulrich was a rapist.
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's at the very least, the question mark is very specifically there. Like, if you'll forgive the awful callback, the question mark is very much on Ulrich's jumper in marker pen here, because, and the show wants it to be there, and it wants you to ask these questions. It's not even like the interesting thing, or I suppose it's not interesting. I think the thing that a lot of people miss with stuff like that is, it's not really, I don't think the show is asking us to draw a conclusion about the rape allegation. It just wants us to think about Ulrich in
a violent way.
Like, think about him as capable of these kind of acts, because it builds this underlying tension which really culminates in this scene. Like, if we didn't have that, and we didn't have him pinning Hannah against the wall, and we didn't have him kind of accosting old Helga in the hospital, this would come as more of a surprise. But there's this very, very sort of subtle build of Ulrich's personality, to where we're not surprised that he's done this. Obviously, this is as far as he's gone before. In fact, I wonder if this is where those questions we got in I think it was first or second episode, where people were asking, how far do I think Ulrich will go to get his son back? I did say I think he'd kill someone. Scratch that one down for Konrad. Thank you very much. But I didn't think it would be quite like this, to be fair. But yeah, the show is building this catalogue of evidence and sort of suspicions against Ulrich specifically for this moment, I think.
Yeah, awesome. We'll nip that in the bud, right? Okay, so we then get Egon going to the Doppler house.
Listening to the same show tune or swing tune that he is listening to 33 years later.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was the same one, but I knew it was a similar thing. Yeah, it was great.
Change the radio.
It's stuck on the same thing.
Yeah.
So basically, he goes into the house and questions where Gretchen is. And I love Greta's body language here.
Yeah.
She's like, first thing she says is, "My husband's not home."
Yeah.
It's very, it's almost like very of the time. It's like, why, you don't talk to me, you talk to my husband.
Yeah, I'm not the man of the house.
Yeah, and then at the end, she sort of just crosses her arms and stares him down.
Utter contempt for Egon as a character. I felt really sorry for Egon in this episode, because he's just trying to do the right thing, and he's not particularly incompetent, but people don't seem to respect him for whatever reason. But yeah, there's a great little as she says goodbye to Egon in this scene, there's a great little kind of swelling of somber music that will lead into the montage that's to follow. But I love the way Dark does this, just throws in these little kind of musical cues to let you know that we're ramping up to something which is going to show us a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And that sort of montage is led into. We see Greta goes and looks for Helga. She finds the dead birds.
Yeah.
We then get Ulrich dragging young Helga into the bunker.
Yeah.
And putting him in there. We then get a montage of a load of different stuff. So there's pictures on the wall.
Oh, I've got some stuff about this montage.
Right. Okay. So off you go.
So first off, I thought it was very the beginning of this montage is like perfect because it mirrors Jonas from the previous episode, I think. So Ulrich puts Helga's body in the bunker, which in his way is kind of and then he closes the door on the bunker, and I think in his own way he thinks this is kind of underlining his own experience with time travel in the same way that Jonas's burning of the letter from Mikkel kind of underlined his experience in the previous episode. So to Ulrich, he is closing the door quite literally, obviously in a far more emphatic and violent way than Jonas did, but equally to Jonas, we know, because of all the talk of determinism throughout this and the fact that we know, and like Ulrich has all this evidence in front of him, like old Helga has the book, he has the penny from 1986 that Ulrich literally gave him, so he knows that what he's done has already occurred, and that's why Helga has it, but he's not thinking clearly. But so it's just brilliant dramatic irony, and as he closes the door, obviously the montage kicks off and it's just this brilliant swelling of music. So the thing that first struck me about this is Helga looks very dead in this. And you know, there's no way that Ulrich would do what he does and leave Helga alive or not check that Helga is dead afterwards. So it's unfathomable to me that he would do this and not be absolutely certain. So we know that Helga is coming back somehow because we've seen him alive with those wounds. So that's immediately sets the mind racing.
Okay.
And then so we'll get back into that later. Don't you worry about that. and then there is this sweeping establishing shot of the trees in Wyndham, which we've seen 1,000 times before, but this time loads of them are dead, which we haven't seen before, which asks the question, when is that? That must be a time we haven't seen yet, because there's something caused all those trees to die. Then there's a bit you alluded to earlier. So there's Agnes Nielsen touching Egon's wife's hand, which I didn't catch Egon's wife's name actually.
Doris.
So touching her hand while they're making a bed, you know, which reveals the red dress ain't just for show. So
it seemed very deliberate as well from Agnes, I would say.
Oh yeah. I've touched a few hands in my time, and don't you worry. Like that was a tactical hand touch.
All the hallmarks of a tactical hand touch.
Yeah, tactical hand touch there. And maybe a future hint, which again we'll get back into, at how the Nielsens may come to own that house. Then you get Tronte Nielsen, which this bit was quite interesting to me because he's looking at what looked like cigar burns on his arm, and relatively recent ones. So to me, obviously Agnes said that his father was dead. So to me, this gives us three possibilities. Either his father did die recently, and he and Agnes are fleeing the murder because they killed his dad because he was abusive, or they are fleeing a still living abusive father, in which case is the abusive father going to come back into the picture, or is it Agnes herself who is abusing him? Because they look quite recent. So there's no conclusive answer on any of those, but all three of those possibilities are fairly juicy in terms of storytelling. So I'll be interested to see where they go with that. And then to go back to the what we're talking about with the YouTube comment about the sort of religious undertones of Kreuzwege as a term, we see Egon at the crossroads between the forest path and the main road with the rosary in the foreground, and then we get one of my favorite bits of the episode. So modern guns and a lot of them. And then old Claudia in a picture on the wall, which we haven't seen before. And then we get old Claudia staring at the wall in what looks like a long coat and a gas mask, and what could potentially be a storm, or given what we can see in the room around her, more likely artillery and gunfire in the distance, and what looks like one of those future torches lighting the room. So that's interesting.
So what's your thoughts there?
I think that she might be in the future, and I think something might have happened that means she's in a military-style bunker.
Interesting.
We'll get into that later.
Okay, no problem.
To be continued.
Awesome. I really liked in this montage how instead of doing like split screens, which you've seen before, they've actually just shown us more detail of the wall, like what seems to be now revealed as Claudia's wall.
Yeah.
So we get all the different threads connecting everyone together.
Yeah, and I think it's a really smart revisiting of that as well, because obviously we haven't really seen it, I think, since the first episode. I don't think it's come back since then.
Yeah, it's like since it was actually like one of the first things we saw in the whole show.
Yeah,
like we saw it before. We even saw it before Michael killed himself.
Yeah, and it's this really, like, you know, obviously you could go back and watch the first episode again and see it and see all the stuff that you now know in it, but it's just a really cool return to that. And then obviously the reveal of Claudia is pretty awesome, because I knew she was going to travel through time, and here she is in what looks like, well, it's definitely at least the present, because those guns are modern. And that future light definitely looks like it's not from the present day. So yeah, I was very excited when it's so smart as well, because they show you the picture of Claudia, which you haven't seen before, so that's exciting. And then it like almost immediately cuts just to Claudia. It's like, oh wow, okay, all right, we're just going straight into this.
We're doing this.
Yeah, it was great. This was one of, I think episode 3 probably had the best one still, but this is one of the best montages in the show so far, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It was really, really up there. It also sort of highlighted to me some of the great casting when it showed the different actors for the young and old next to each other.
Yeah, that's nuts, like how good they are with that.
Yeah, like the young Katerina. There's just a few of them that are just so good. And as we go through the show, there's even more. Trust me, like in terms of even just through photos, you see younger, and I'm just thinking to myself, how on earth did they get that? You know,
yeah.
Sometimes you just assume they must have used a photo of, like, they actually got a photo of the same person.
Yeah, no, it's unreal that they managed to get so many actors who look exactly correct. Like, and you know, I don't actually know if old Claudia is the same actor who they got to play middle Claudia and just kind of aged her up or aged her down, I guess, for the 80s role.
No, she's not. She's not.
It's not the same one. Okay, because they look very, very convincing.
Yeah. Like Claudia is one of the ones that looks really convincing. There's a couple of them which are just really, really good. Yeah. Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that going forward. But next scene, we get sort of the last scene between old HG Townhouse and the stranger.
Yeah, I love that he starts this with, it's just a theory.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think it is, my dude.
I love, like, the main theoretical thread, like the thread that's been happening the whole way through the series. He's been sort of narrating the whole time, and then he just goes, but that's just a theory.
Yeah, it's like, is it really now? Because I suspect you may be onto something.
Yeah, exactly. It's so good. So they sort of have a bit of a disagreement because the stranger shows him the machine.
Oh, yeah.
And then HG is like, what the hell is this? You need to leave. And then the stranger says, things have to be set right, and you have to help me. I've seen the future. Something's got to be done about your kids, Marty.
Yeah, the I come from the future stinger is very I am your density kind of here. And it's just, there's so much in this scene, like that's just, I watched this scene probably 4 or 5 times. It was a fantastic scene. Like the idea that the machine creates wormholes, and that there was an accident at the nuclear power plant which created the wormhole under Vinden, which is the 8653 2019 wormhole, but that you can create other ones, which, oh, by the way, I called the nuclear plant was concealing something from the beginning. So good. And then I'm sure you're going to get into this, but I'm excited enough that I need to talk about it, which is so, you know, do you want to create another wormhole, when he asks him to fix the machine, and the stranger's like, no, I want to destroy the one that exists. And there's another stinger, and it's a badass line. It's as soon as he said that, I started thinking to myself, we got ourselves a story arc, boys. Like, here we go.
yeah. We've got a story.
It only took them 8 bloody episodes to get to a story arc, but here we are. Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome. So also at the end of the episode, we're missing at the end of the scene, we're missing a huge part, is that HG Townhouse takes down
Oh yeah.
the new machine, and
Yeah.
it's almost like we're seeing, like, the way I'm going to put this is, it's almost like, well, when I first watched this, my idea was, oh, we're kind of seeing two ends of this machine's life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Like he hasn't used it yet at that point.
No, it doesn't look. It
but
looks brand new.
And you know that, Tannhaus, obviously based on how he responds to what the stranger tells him, isn't ready to hear this, but you suspect he will be, and you suspect the stranger knows he will be. And this idea of like a constantly recurring loop within this wormhole makes you start thinking, how many times has this happened? How many times has the stranger had this conversation? And there's one or two other things that I took from this. So the first is him saying, I've seen the future, I know what will happen. To me, feels like a very pointed reference to where Claudia is right now and the massive swathe of forest that has died. And, that potentially being 2052 maybe, as where some kind of like conflict or nuclear disaster will happen, potentially as a result of control of these wormholes, or just by the sort of escalating technology around this stuff that H.G. Tannhaus has invented. But I feel like that's definitely something that this character has seen. And I'm not going to talk about it now, but one thing I noticed in this scene, which I hadn't noticed about the stranger previously, was that obviously he's covered in scars, but he has a very, very, very prominent scar around his neck. Like he's either had his throat cut or he has hung himself.
Yeah.
And he's clearly still alive. So I have a theory about that as well.
Okay, awesome. So we'll just finish up the episode, then we'll get into those theories. So young H.G. Tannhaus finds Ulrich's phone in his pocket. Yeah. And there was a great moment where he turns it on, he throws it on the bench.
Yeah, it's terrified.
He's terrified of it. So do you have any thoughts about sort of how that's going to be important, or whether it is, or?
So that we'll probably visit this in the theories as well, because this is one I got wrong. But I kind of stand by my idea that H.G. Tannhaus was just a clockmaker at some point, and something set him off on the path to becoming a physicist. And I wonder if him finding this is his into becoming a physicist. So we're getting back into that determinism stuff again, that he wasn't, he wasn't going to be able to create a time traveling device until someone came back in time and left their iPhone 7 or whatever. Exactly,
yeah. So awesome. And then we'll just end the episode, because I'm aware that we're getting a bit long now. We do have a lot of theories to go through. This is going to be a long episode, I think.
Yeah.
That's all right. I'm sure the listeners don't mind. So Ulrich then at the end is just sitting there, I would say reflecting upon what he's done.
Yeah, I mean,
but I don't know. I don't even know if his face is sort of even showing me reflection. I think he's just.
He seems utterly remorseless to me. He's just staring, unblinking at the door to the bunker.
Making sure that Helga doesn't come back out again.
Yeah, I think he's making sure he's dead. And then, the little TikTok sound to close the episode.
Yeah.
It's just a great little bookend to the episode to say, to kind of imply that all that has happened before and will happen again, and this is all just part of a big dance, as H.G. Tannhaus describes it.
Yeah, exactly. It's great. Okay, so let's get into the roundup.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so I kind of feel like you're a lawnmower, and I just need to pull the string and let you go here.
Just point me in the right direction.
But one thing we'll do my utterly useless
rating.
IMDb rating, which
it's not useless. We're showing IMDb users who's boss by
telling them they're wrong.
Them.
Yeah. So this episode what is it? Episode 8 got a 9.2.
Okay.
Which is actually the highest value so far. And I think that my personal thought is that's all down to Ulrich beating Helga. Like people saw that and they're like, "Oh my god, yeah!" Which
it's a bunch of sociopaths.
Yeah, well, no, but I mean, like it's a real big payoff in a way for the build of the character. I can see people ending the episode with a 9.2 in their mind. It does put it as the best episode in the season, except for it equals one more, which we haven't seen yet. But It puts it as the best in the season. What do you think about that?
I think that score is probably pretty fair. I still think episode 5 is the best and should be almost a 10, if not a 10, because that was like a perfect episode of television as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But this is pretty close to that, and there was just there was so much good in this episode. It's just a strong episode from start to finish. Like you say, Ulrich getting pushed to, and then one might say over the brink of madness is great. There's some really fantastically compelling reveals, like Claudia being back. The stranger and Tannhaus kind of expository dialogue underpinning the whole episode is really fascinating and interesting, because it's just throwing in these little like morsels of the wider time travel theory about determinism and causality, and that like the kind of the expanding of what we know about the sort of wormhole plot at the center of Vinden and the show really broadens the horizons as to what we can do now, because we know there's a wormhole under Vinden, but we also know there are machines that can create wormholes, and we know kind of roughly how they work. And it's it's bizarre that I don't know how they've done it, looking back on it, like that they've managed to make the show really compelling and interesting without really getting to the meat of their plot until the 8th episode of the first season. But somehow they've done it, and I wonder if they're sticking to this kind of track now, or whether there's just going to be more and more stuff opened up.
That's actually, I'm sure one of the listeners will probably ask you this question, but I was just wondering, in terms of the stranger wanting to destroy the wormhole, when do you envisage that happening? Like, when do you envisage his attempt at that?
Oh, I mean, I don't think that's coming for a while. Because if you close the wormhole in Vinden, that's presumably when all of this started. So if you close the wormhole in Vinden, I guess you're kind of resetting everything, and like you're closing the time loop. So I don't think we're going to see that for a while.
Okay. Oh, okay, cool. Right, theory time. Off you go.
Okay, so first off, I'm going to go through the stuff that I got wrong as a result of this episode, because there's a few.
Cool.
So,
but you don't have to don't go into too much detail, because we'll go into details on the theories in the series sum up, the season 1 summary show. But just like list them off, which ones you got wrong.
So for those playing along at home, get your red pens out, because falsch. Yeah. Number 1, Tannhaus is just a clockmaker in the 80s and becomes a physicist as a result of the stranger's intervention. So I think I was half right with this, but I think I was just 30 years off, and it was Ulrich's phone rather than the stranger that got him started.
True.
So number 2, Helga was placed in the 80s by the hooded figures, and his ear was a result of them. Did not see. I should have really seen it, but I didn't see Ulrich coming, to be honest. Number 3, the Chiketra tying into like the Yggdrasil, 9 Worlds, Norse mythology stuff, just completely wrong by the looks of things on that.
I thematically, some of the things.
I think there are some idea, like thematic consistencies with traveling through the world tree, which is like the wormhole. But I'm prepared to mark that one off as wrong, because it's too vague. There's a few vague ones. One of my early theories is, and I quote, Peter Doppler is guilty of something, which, what does that even mean?
It also depends
on his wife.
It also depends what era you're living in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Adultery.
Guilty of loads of things. Number 4, this is a doozy. The government conspiracy to send kids back to the 80s to test bringing them forward in time. I put in brackets, what was I even thinking here? So that was not a good one. And then 5th.
Although, to be honest with you, when you made that one, you were very much in the mode of 80s horror, 80s.
Yeah. That was the first episode. So, I mean, I give myself a little bit of leeway for, getting stuff wrong in the first episode.
Of course.
And then 5th, Helga has been duplicated by Noah and Co. Open parentheses, I still think he has been duplicated, which is how his older self is able to step through times, but not by Noah, which we'll get into in a second.
Interesting.
But so those are the ones that I've got down as like definitively wrong. I've marked a few others off as wrong on my matrix, which we'll probably go through in the season roundup.
Yeah.
But okay, so theories. So obviously we kind of know this in this episode, but just to sort of nail it down, in killing Helga, Ulrich has actually put him in the path of Noah, I think, because we know from the beginning of the last episode that Helga either isn't dead, well, which seems unfathomable, or he is dead and will come back to life. So I think that, and this goes back to the meeting between the stranger and Jonas in the graveyard, where he says that death is unfathomable, but it's like kind of a way to escape the loop. And I wonder if by dying, it allows you to escape your time or the loop somehow. We know that Helge has died and woken up in a different time, or perhaps outside of time. He's woken up in that bunker where his body was left, but in what looks like the 80s. And I wonder if the stranger, given the scars on his neck, has also hung himself like Mikkel to kind of escape the time loop.
Interesting.
And if perhaps Mikkel or Michael killing himself in the first episode was him doing it to escape the loop. So it's not actually him ending his own life. It's him doing it to escape the loop and go off to try and rectify it, I guess. So my suspicion now with Helge is that he's going to come back to life in the bunker in the 80s, because I guess that's the center of the sort of three-pronged wormhole in Vinden. I'm not really sure how he's going to come back, but by coming back in the 80s, it's going to put him directly in a path with Noah, who will sort of coerce young Helge into joining him by like looking after him and saying, you're out of time now, or I'm the only thing you have. So Helge will effectively have to serve Noah because he has no one else, because he's a 10-year-old out of time. And Ulrich has explicitly put him on that path. And I suspect that Noah has one of those wormhole machines as well that the stranger has given to H.G. Tannhaus to fix. So that's how Noah is stepping between times. So I'm really fascinated to see how that develops, because I think there are two Helgas, but I don't think it was as purposeful as I made it out to be in the last episode. I think it's purely that by dying, maybe it's dying in a certain place or dying in a certain way, but by dying, Helge has now escaped the loop. So yeah, that's my big theory to do with death and to do with Helge and Noah and Ulrich. I've got a couple of others as well. I don't know if you wanted to say anything on that one before I keep going.
So I just want to, you keep using the word unfathomable. So in your mind, there's I might be trying to lead you down a certain path here, but in terms of I want you to go a certain way for hilariousness sake. But there's in your mind, there's no way that Helga's alive.
Well, I can't see Ulrich beating a kid's head in and not making absolutely sure he was dead. It just seems that would seem like a massive oversight and not very realistic to me. I mean, I guess he could wake up and I guess he could not be dead, and somehow like being in the bunker sort of ends up with him waking up in a different time because it sort of shields him or magnifies the effects of the wormhole or something. But I think it's, in a bizarre way, I think it's a lot more likely that by dying he has like escaped the loop and is now waking up outside of time or in the center of time, which I guess in this wormhole is 86.
Where have we got to in episode 8 of Dark so far, where you're already willing to make a statement like, I think it's more likely that he died and he still lives in a different, like, sort of outside of time area, rather than just being like, yeah, Ulrich just didn't realize his heart was still beating.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the show will completely humiliate me in one episode's time when it's just like, yeah, he just has a stronger constitution than Ulrich gave him credit for.
He was playing D&D and he rolled a life-saving throw.
Yeah. He used one of his I can't remember what they're called, those points that allow you to like save your own life, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know. He looked very dead to me, and the close shots of his face and stuff. That Helge is dead. Like, there's no way he's not dead. And we know that he wakes up in that room in what very much is strongly suggested to be the 80s, given we've seen it in the 50s and there's no wallpaper, and we've seen it in 2019 and there's no wallpaper. So it's either 1986 or it's the future, which I'll get into in a second.
Well, it can't be the
But,
future because remember, Charlotte did find a bit of the wallpaper.
yeah, that's true as well. So Charlotte found the wallpaper, so it kind of must be the 80s, really. So, you know, we know that Helge has woken up with those wounds still fresh on his face in the 80s. So something's going on.
Something's going on.
Yeah. But yeah, so following on from that, then I think there's been like a nuclear disaster or all-out nuclear war, which kind of gotten into already, but in the future, which is where the Stranger is from and where Claudia currently is. And I think that's what they're trying to stop. They want to destroy the wormhole in Vinden because they know that the wormhole in Vinden will basically set in motion a sequence of events which will lead the world to kind of nuclear catastrophe or some kind of catastrophe, I guess.
Okay, cool. Is that your theories for the week?
Well, I've got one other one, which is that Agnes Nielsen is going to seduce Tronta's wife, maybe Tronta too, and steal their home away from them.
You mean Egon's wife?
Oh, sorry, yeah, Egon's wife. Yeah, maybe she'll seduce Tronta. I don't know how that relationship works. Egon's wife, rather, yeah, and potentially Egon as well, and steal their home from them as part of it, which I think will really kind of lean into Egon's kind of sad story that, you know, he's always been a good man and he's just been constantly screwed over by people around him. But the big part of this theory is she might be Marta because.
Okay.
Because when they every time they've talked about her character, they've talked about how the future can also influence the past, and obviously that's mainly talking about Ulrich going back and killing Helga, that kind of sets certain events in motion. But I feel like the fact they're not saying who she is, and she says her grandma is also from Vinden. I don't know. She looks a bit like Marta.
That would mean that Ulrich's granny is his daughter.
Yes.
Although you have alluded to a theory that Marta is not his actual biological daughter.
Yeah, I think I'm like the fact they haven't like come back to that. I think is maybe me reading more into the Ariadne play than they intended. But yeah, so yeah, Ulrich's grandma is also his daughter.
Okay, I'm on board for that theory.
yeah, chalk that one up.
Yeah, that's great.
On the Matrix.
Yeah, I also like how the idea. It's sort of actually maybe I shouldn't say this because it's sort of making it out as if I'm fully agreeing with you when I'm trying to be neutral, but which I'm not intending to do. And it also, just to let you know before I say this, it isn't proving that I'm agreeing with you. But I just thought of this. Your theory that Agnes forces them out of the house would kind of sort of work a little bit as to why Egon, when he's older, has a thing against Ulrich.
Yeah, I did. I was kind of looking out for that in this episode, to be honest. Like, look, obviously I think they only have the one interaction in the police station. It's relatively amicable. Yeah. Obviously, Ulrich's, you know, being Ulrich and just charging around like a bull in the china shop. But yeah, so I'm interested to see where Egon's animosity towards the Nielsens comes from. And yeah, I hadn't actually considered that, but that would totally play into this if it does end up that Nielsen seduces Agnes Nielsen ends up seducing his wife, and their marriage kind of falls apart as a result, and he has to move out. And actually, also talking about people moving homes as well, one thing I didn't mention was the Dopplers have a really nice house in 1953, and they now do not have a really nice house. And I wonder what happened to all of their money. And yeah, like what transpired there.
Don't give an answer to this, but you know how sometimes our listeners point you in a certain direction?
Yeah.
Well, whether for their own enjoyment or whether because there is something there. But someone has actually asked a question. So tuning in this Saturday for this question.
Okay. Nice.
So basically, the question is, do you recognize the Doppler mansion from anywhere? So just think about that. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's us done for the roundup. Let's get into the what the dub.
What the dub?
So every week I'm watching the English dub. I've never watched the full thing before, so I'm putting myself through it. Some might call it torture. I call it great fun. This week, I say great fun. Konrad, I'm getting to the point where I'm getting too used to it. There's not much that I'm finding funny anymore.
I'll start to worry when you get to the point where you're actually saying it's actually pretty good.
Yeah,
That's call the men in
I'm
whiteface.
definitely not saying that. Like the whole feel of the show is not there for me. Like in the 50s, you know, it's just every time I heard the American voices, it just took me out of it. I don't know. I don't know, but this week, to be honest with you, I was really scraping the barrel this week, and I really, really thought to myself, let's just not do What the Dub this week. But I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so we have to do it every week, no matter what, even if it's something that's terrible like this. Now, this time, as it has been before, it comes across as if I'm being praiseworthy of the dub here. But it's not really a comment on the dub in general. It's more this, right? Now, last week and before, people have commented on the way that we pronounce Helga.
Yeah.
Right? So we pronounce it Helga as if it's Helga, which I think is more of a feminine name, Helga.
Yeah.
So apparently, I might even get this pronunciation wrong, but the way that they spelt it out for me, I think it's meant to be Helge.
Yeah, I think that's how I would, if I was really committing to pronouncing it correctly, I think that's probably how I would try and do it.
Yeah, Helge.
Helge.
Yeah. So, but we say Helga, which is wrong, and I'm 100% okay to admit that. It makes me think of Helga Pataki from Hey Arnold, so I like that as well. But what the thing I noticed in the dub this week is they're all saying Tronti and Tiedemann and Helga, right?
Yeah.
Just Helga's obviously we say it too, but they're all saying the wrong thing. And then out of nowhere, the young actress who does the dub for Claudia, young Claudia,
yeah,
she said, maybe Gretchen's with Helge.
She's like the one German speaker. She's like an American who took German at university or something, and she's like subtly trying to course correct the pronunciation.
Yeah, like it really got me because after someone commented it last week, you know, basically saying we're pronouncing it wrong. It was really like I was keenly looking out for it, and this young actress who's doing the voice, like, because she's completely wasted in the dub. I'll say that because she's actually got the pronunciation right.
Yeah, so, look out for her in a Hollywood production in the near future because she's going places. Whoever that actress is. She
actually think and branching off the back of that, I was really scraping the barrel again, thinking, what could I talk about? And then whenever this is really, and I'm sorry to the listeners for this paints me in a very bad light, what I'm about to say.
Oh, Christ.
When I was watching the scene where Helga was being bullied,
yeah,
I thought to myself as it was coming up, I don't know why I thought this. I thought it'd be funny if the actor who played the bully in the English dub, like in the studio where they're recording his voice, was like a method actor.
Or did actually got the sound out of him pissing?
Just started pissing on the floor of the studio, and
or it'd be funny if he was like a Foley artist as well. Like he sort of.
He's got like a bit of cling film in front of the thing, trying to make it sound like the urination.
Yeah.
But and then that thought came to me, and I just couldn't stop laughing. But the reason why it came to me as well is because the initial thought that popped into my mind was, and I don't know why, I thought, I wonder if they're going to dub the urination.
That distinctly sounds like a German flow to me.
Yeah.
You want it to be American. Thank you very much.
Yeah, like
our listeners won't understand.
Yeah, like they're both in the same hemisphere, so they would swirl the right way. But you know,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so I don't know, but anyway, that's what I noticed this week. Anyway, well, one was what I noticed. The other thing was just my crazy brain doing things.
I think you're making excuses for it because it's becoming normalized for you. But I still think there's a rich vein of comedy to be mined from this like awful dub and its awful pronunciations. Although I do appreciate the hypocrisy of saying that while I sort of systematically mispronounce the names of every character in the show. I mean, in some cases I just get the names completely wrong.
Yeah, like
who am I to talk? Yeah, Catherine, and Egon is now Tronte.
Yeah, and I would say as well, coming up in episode 10, I already know what the dub is for that. I've known that from the start. There's a part in episode 10 which made me think of doing this what the dub segment to begin with. So
okay, good. So we've got like light at the end of the tunnel.
We've got light at the end of the tunnel. No pun intended, actually, there, Konrad. Towards the end of this season. Okay, so that was our episode this week. I think we went pretty well, Konrad. What about you?
Yeah, that was fun. I really enjoyed that episode. I can't wait to see where we go from here. I know I say that at the end of almost every episode, but that was a really strong one. And we've got ourselves a show.
We got ourselves a show and a plot, apparently.
And a plot, yeah.
Yeah, so make sure you subscribe on YouTube as well as on the podcast audio apps. Leave a comment below underneath if you want to ask Konrad questions. Remember, we might not be making a fully fledged video for it based on the whole situation going on with me. However, if we can get them answered in some way in the future before we sort of move too far in the show, we'll try and do that for you. So by all means, or maybe even just ask questions to each other. Who knows?
Have a conversation.
So this Saturday, look out for the... no, actually, I just said that's not happening.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm going mad. I'm going mad at the minute. I'm back at work. I've started showing my face in videos. I've got a new baby on the way. I'm absolutely... My head is melting.
You're not our real dad. You can't tell us when to release videos, all right?
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, anyway, I think that's us for the week. Have a good week, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the After Dark podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode.